Okay, so 8, 9, 10, 11 I'll do in one video. These are all you doing hypothesis testing using the p-value method. The key difference between the p-value method and the test statistic critical value method, the traditional method, is that for this method, we're asked to do an analysis using the p-value and alpha. And the nice thing is in these four examples, we're given both, so we just have to do the analysis. So for these problems, if the p-value, or the probability value, is less than or equal to alpha, reject the null hypothesis. I'm only going to write this once. I'm not going to write this again and again, so this is where I write it. If the p-value is greater than alpha, the alpha level, then you do not reject the null hypothesis. That's it. Now, normally we would have to calculate the test statistic and then based on that test statistic determine what the probability value or what the p-value would be and then compare it to alpha, but in these problems we're already given the p-value. In a problem where you have to go from soup to nuts, you have to literally calculate the test statistic and then use that test statistic to determine what your p-value is going to be based on your alpha value, based on what kind of tailed test you're doing. But for these problems, it's very straightforward. Compare the p-value to the alpha level. That's it. That's what we're doing. So in the first one is the p-value. The p-value is 0.181. The alpha value is 0.05. In this case, the p-value is greater than alpha, so you do not reject. Now, these problems are just like the others from the previous video where we have to determine if we made a type 1, type 2 error, or the correct decision. So here's our decision based on hypothesis testing. Since the alpha value is since the p-value is greater than alpha, do not reject the null hypothesis. Let's see if we made an error or not. Same table from before. Either the null hypothesis is true or false, and either we rejected HO or we did not reject HO, H sub O. If the null hypothesis was true and we rejected it, type 1 error. If the null hypothesis was false and we rejected it, then we made the correct decision. If the null hypothesis was true and we didn't reject it, we made the correct decision. If the null hypothesis was false, but we didn't reject it, type 2 error. So in this case, the true value of the population mean is 70, which matches our null hypothesis. So that means our null hypothesis was true, and we did not reject the null hypothesis. So we made the correct decision this time. Looking at the second one, the p-value is 28 thousandths. Alpha is 500ths. So in this case, the p-value is less than alpha. So we reject the null hypothesis. We're just comparing the two. If the p-value is less than or equal to, reject the null hypothesis. If the p-value is greater than, don't reject the null hypothesis. That's all we're doing here. Right? So I've got our table again. So HO, true, false. HO, reject, not reject. I'm being a little smarter now, right? Okay. Type 1 error, type 2 error, correct decision, correct decision. So, the true value of the population mean is 41, which is different than 46, right? Which matches with our alternative hypothesis. reject that. So that null hypothesis was false. It was not true. It was not true. It was not true. Null hypothesis was false because the null hypothesis says the mean is 46. But no, the mean is actually 41. But we rejected it. So the null hypothesis was false and we rejected it. So we made the correct decision again. We're correct. Okay. Number 10. Same stuff. The p-value is 122 thousandths. Alpha is 500ths. P-value is definitely greater. So do not reject the null. Okay. Okay, so let's type 1 error, type 2 error. This is correct. Correct decision. So, in all actuality, the true value of the mean is 55, which matches the null hypothesis. So the null hypothesis was true. We did not reject the null hypothesis. The null hypothesis was true. We did not reject it, so we made the correct decision. We're on a roll here making correct decisions, huh? Okay. Last one. P-value is 84 thousandths. Alpha value is 100th. P-value is greater. Do not reject the null hypothesis. So let's see what happens here. Null hypothesis is true or false. Either we rejected it or we did not reject it. Type 1 error, type 2 error. Correct. Correct. So the mean is less than 48. It's not 48. Less than 48. So the null hypothesis was false. We did not reject the null hypothesis. It was false, but we didn't reject it. Type 2 error.